All right, I'm going to go ahead and introduce um, our guest and let him follow that up with any introductions and then get us started. So this semester and potentially even longer than that, we are excited to have Jonathan Walker with us, whose background is ophthalmology. Is that accurate?
Correct. Yep.
Awesome. And after retiring, or maybe in the midst of that, has also found passion in mindfulness practices and has done quite a bit of training in that area. And so he has done some things with the university before. He joined us last year for a Wellness Wednesday. And we are planning to have him provide these mindful moments on Wednesdays every other week through the semester. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And thank you guys for being here too. This is really your half hour, not my half hour. So I'm going to do this first visit. I think I'm really just going to go back to the basics of self-compassion, which is what I did last year, but I just find I can't hear enough of that. Just real quick in terms of my background, as April was saying, I am a retired ophthalmologist, a retinal surgeon. So if you have questions about your eyes, feel free to ask. I love to talk about that. But I came to these practices about 8 years ago for the main reason most people do, which is just being utterly miserable and everything going wrong. And it's kind of cool because you don't need to worry about copays or deductibles or finding time in your schedule to make appointments and stuff. And it took a while, maybe 2 to 3 months to begin to sense some changes, but really after a year or two, there was no doubt in my mind. It really helped with things like caregiver fatigue and burnout in the office. It really transformed my experience of patient care back to the way it was, where I actually enjoyed interacting with patients and dealing with administration and bureaucracy. I didn't really enjoy that, but it made it easier to hold. And although my family keeps reminding me that I'm still very much a work in progress, I know it's also changed how I relate to the folks around me. Disclaimers, I'm not selling anything. I do this as just totally as a volunteer. As a matter of fact, I just met with the wellness team for the entire Indiana University medical system this morning, which was a really fascinating thing to hear. But probably the biggest disclaimer is don't believe anything I talk about. All right. This stuff is really, between you and your heart and your mind. So with those caveats, yeah, why don't we talk a little bit about this? All of this tends to come under the rubric of mindfulness. And I think we all know that mindfulness is a good thing. I mean, you go on the internet and look up stress reduction or burnout or anything, and inevitably on that list is mindfulness. But the problem is it's hard to do that. Okay, there's very little uptake, even though research has shown it's beneficial. And part of it has to do with, the effort it does. People have to find time in their busy lives to meditate, and the changes tend to be very slow and gradual. And the idea with mindfulness is that, one of the ideas is that whatever's going on in our lives, somehow we manage to make it worse. Our thinking mind, with the best of intentions, tends to worry and become frantic. And mindfulness is about getting quiet and realizing that, seeing how that happens and seeing how it plays out in our lives and beginning to change that. And as we go through these practices or these visits, I'm happy to explore that. But the self-compassion practices are a little different. They kind of approach it from a different direction. And it gets back to this idea that as people lift up the hood of their mind and see what's going on, the vast majority of us tend to be very caring and compassionate people, but we tend to cut ourselves out of our own circle of caring. Okay, it's almost like we cut ourselves out of our own heart. And at some point, maybe we can talk about why that is. I think a lot of it is cultural. even our parents with the best of intentions, from a very young age, we're getting this message that whoever we are, we're not the right shape or gender or color, or we talk too much, or we talk too little, or not smart enough. This message that whoever we are, it's not enough. We need to be something else. And when we don't have that sense of support for ourselves, that self-compassion, it comes out in all kinds of ways. Like we can't be as caring as we want to be for other folks. We certainly don't have our own back, when trouble arises. And there's often a tendency to just want to please everyone around us, to be perfect, to make everyone happy, because that's how we can gather our self-worth and self-esteem, because we've lost the ability to be with ourselves. And I'm just going to do a real brief visualization exercise to see how this works out in your own minds. So to start with, maybe just, close your eyes, maybe take a deep breath. This won't take more than a moment or two. You don't have to close your eyes if you don't want to. Just settling into the chair and bring to mind someone you really care for, a loved one, a dear one, a friend, family member. And just imagine something bad has happened to them. They've made a mistake, they're embarrassed, some awkward situation has occurred, and they're feeling really bad. Okay, and this may bring to mind a specific situation or just a general idea of how you approach this. So this person that's really dear to you, they're struggling. How do you respond to them? Okay, really think about this. What words do you say? Right? Or the tone of voice of those words? And what about posture, or physical gestures? How are you showing this person that you really care for them? And just bringing this situation to mind and how you demonstrate this. And just I'd ask you to pause a moment, and some people even like to write it down, but just thinking a little bit about how you responded to them, what you said, what you did. And then I'm going to have you shift to a different frame. Maybe again, taking another deep breath to reset. And now think about a time you did something you feel bad about, something shameful or embarrassing, a mistake. You weren't perfect. And how do you respond to yourselves? Okay. What words do you say under those circumstances? What's the tone of voice that you're using to yourself? And even physical gestures and your posture. How are you responding to yourself when you've done something embarrassing and shameful? And then again, just taking a moment to reflect on that and to really reflect on the difference. And I would invite you guys to unmute or chat in if anyone wants to comment about what they noticed. And the beautiful thing about these online things is you don't have to do that if you don't want to or you're not drawn to. But let me at least, if did anybody, you can raise your hand digitally or physically, did anybody find that they were kinder to themselves than they were to a friend? Yeah, and the researchers suggest that maybe only 5% of people support themselves in that way or are kinder to themselves. And I personally can't imagine what it would be like to wake up in the morning and have this supportive voice greet me rather than a voice that's judgmental or criticizing or scared or desperately wanting to having everyone like me, So for the other 95% of us, these practices are specifically designed to address that. Because again, I think people sense this intuitively. If we're not aware of our needs, of who we are, of giving ourselves validation and recognition and attention and acceptance, it's hard to go around your day because you have these voices just, tearing at you, taking away your energy and resilience. And the research is pretty clear. Okay, and there's a lot of research. The people that really tried to define self-compassion are research psychologists and clinical psychologists, and there's been over 1,600 papers. And it's for instance, people who have more self-compassion tend to have less trouble with depression, anxiety, or stress. There's also, the idea that they have more well-being, happiness, resilience, and other things, willing to take risks, accepting responsibility, setting boundaries. And as I talk about this, particularly when I talk about this with healthcare, people, they're going through such a difficult time right now, in healthcare, we're convinced that we have to be hard with ourselves. We have to have that harsh, critical voice yelling at us. Otherwise, people will die or things will get messed up. So people often have misgivings about self-compassion. It's going to make me weak, or I'm going to become self-pitying, or oh jeepers, I'm just going to let myself off the hook. And the research shows otherwise. Again, over and over again, when you're really listening to your inner heart, you don't become lazy and weak and let yourself off the hook. You are more willing to admit mistakes and take responsibility and try new things and engage in healthier habits, because you're being motivated from a much deeper part of yourself that for many of us for years we never even listened to. And I'm going to just show just one bit of research here. Oh, can you allow me screen sharing, please? I'm sorry, I should have checked with you in advance. But this is something that I find really interesting here.
And I need help knowing how to allow you to do that.
You can go to security. You have the little security badge, and just click on that, and there should be a checkoff box.
Yep, there you go.
All right. And thank you for that trust, April, because who knows what this retired ophthalmologist sitting in his basement might drop in on screen share. But I think you'll find this interesting. And again, this is something that I often show to people like in the business world or healthcare workers or people that really feel like they have to be harsh and critical of themselves to succeed. And this is a study looking at PTSD in combat veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan. And they assess them for their level of self-compassion. There's all these metrics where you can measure this kind of stuff. And interestingly, they found two things. First of all, they found a negative association between self-compassion and PTSD. Simply, the folks that had more a sense of supporting themselves, that self-compassionate aspect, they had less trouble with PTSD. But even more interesting, they found that the ability to have self-compassion, again, to support yourself, was the main factor that determined whether they would have PTSD. It wasn't the amount of time spent in combat or how traumatic it was or how many rotations they did. Simply being able to attend to themselves with caring and compassion. And that's not the wording that I'm sure, these military people, would work. I don't think they'd frame it that way, but just having that part of yourself back in your own heart can be powerful. And if it helps people deal with the trauma of combat, it can probably help the rest of us deal with things like a hectic work situation or a difficult family situation, or heck, planning, who's going to come over for Christmas and who's going to bring the food. So for this part, I've really kind of stayed above the neck to maybe engage interest and curiosity about self-compassion. And it turns out there's lots of ways to bring self-compassion into our lives. And I'm going to go through a couple of exercises here. But I think it's worth noting, we're all pretty familiar with this fight or flight response, okay? Because that's how we spend most of our days. Even if we're not totally freaking out, we're a little bit freaked out. And how do you know? Well, you can check in right now. As you're listening to me talk, check into your body. Just check into your jaws, your neck, your shoulders. See if there's any tension there that actually didn't need to be there. Okay, and maybe softening into the chair. Notice that you can attend to that while you're listening to me. Your awareness, that's the mindfulness piece, is actually pretty amazing. But my point in bringing that up is it's possible that tightness in the body may represent some tightness in the mind. For me, I'm like a heavy duty introvert. So simply being on a Zoom room, when I just did that exercise, I felt all this extra tightness. I mean, and you could also be tight just because you were getting ready to shift, because I've been talking for a while. So it's not like I'm saying you're absolutely stressed out. But my point is we all spend our days at least a little bit in that fight or flight mode. But we all know we have the other pathway, the tend and befriend, the nurturing, the oxytocin pathways, and so in self-compassion, we try to engage all kinds of different ways to bring that in. And two main ways are physical touch and soothing vocalizations. All right, and the touch piece is pretty obvious. The research shows again and again that physical touch is just helpful for well-being. For instance, I would round in the newborn intensive care units, and decades ago, the little babies would just be in their little incubators and get worked on. But then people realized, hey, we got to get these babies out and put them on someone's chest. And that actually changed the outcomes. They did better. Or the research showing that simply holding hands with someone, during a surgical procedure can decrease the perception of pain. The problem is, in the middle of a busy day, you can't run home and pet your dog or hug a loved one. So the invitation is to think about, bringing supportive touch to ourselves. So I'm going to go through a series of moves. And the first thing I'll do is remind you that one of the more fundamental questions of self-compassion is, what do I need right now? So I'd invite you to ask your body that question. And if you need to stand up or twist or stretch, we spend so much time attending to the needs of those around us that we often don't even know what we need. So ask your body what it needs, maybe stretching a little bit. And what I'm going to invite you to do is I'll go through some different movements, and maybe close your eyes in between movements to just see how these resonate. Don't expect any dramatic changes, or what we're really doing is just seeing if the body responds to these moves in a way that you might find helpful or positive. So the first one's pretty simple, and it's just down in your lap. If you hold one hand out, okay, again, down here, I don't have the camera down there, and then put the other hand in it, and just sitting like that, and take a moment to really soften into this. Maybe take a little bit of a breath, checking your body, softening again around the upper body and the torso, and just to see what it's like to hold yourself in this way, literally being the holder and the held. And again, not looking for anything dramatic, just seeing if there's something that resonates for you. Another move is to clasp one hand in the other. Okay, again, down in your lap. This could be gentle or it could be firm. There's an aspect to self-compassion that there's some real strength here when you really listen to yourself. And people tell me this is handy in the middle of a stressful meeting. You can just briefly remind yourself that you're here for yourself. And then another thing is, think about what happens when you get sudden worrisome news. Okay, and that is perhaps to put both your hands over your heart. Why don't we just use this purposefully and take a moment to see what it's like to really bring your hands towards your chest and feel that pressure, okay? Feel that sense of being here for yourself. Sometimes people visualize this sense of support or caring just flowing from their hands into the rest of their body. And sometimes a different move, just putting a fist over your heart. Again, this is the stronger aspects of compassion, or even a combination of the fist and then a hand over that, almost a combination of the nurturing aspects of compassion and the strength. And just feeling that over your heart. Again, breathing, softening. Sometimes people even like to rock a little bit as we do this, or weave side to side. And perhaps the classic one is just one hand over the heart. Okay, maybe gently rubbing or altering the pressure. And it's not just the move, okay? It's also the intention behind the move. Really see if you can have this intention of letting your body know, letting yourself know that you're here for yourself right now. And sometimes one hand over the heart, again, I can't show it on the camera, but one hand over the belly, okay, at the same time. Belly is often a very charged area, body image issues, maybe medical problems, but just see what it's like to just support yourself in these two areas. And not looking for anything dramatic. We're just seeing if the body responds in any way that may be supportive. And another one is both hands down over the abdomen. Okay, again, this idea of really just caring for yourself, holding yourself. And I'll remind you that these may not work, or sometimes people don't like them. So it's really, we're just experimenting here. Then another move, is to put one hand on the cheek and really notice all the sensations here. Your face is very sensitive, your hand is very sensitive, really bringing a lot of sensation here, but also the idea of, again, just being kind to yourself, and sometimes both hands too. Just remembering to breathe, checking into the body, seeing if it's tightening up and softening that. And then something else, just simply reaching across your chest and holding your shoulder. Maybe giving it a squeeze or a light rub. Just once again, just letting yourself know that you're here for yourself. And sometimes both hands, Some people like to tap, or just again the squeeze or massage. And then maybe one hand over a shoulder. Okay, this is really literally having your own back, or both hands. And what I can do is I can provide a handout, if you want to review those things. And like I said, it's not necessarily that they're going to do anything dramatic. I certainly, when I tried this the first time, I really didn't sense anything at all, but I recognized the power. So I cultivated it. I would put my hand over my heart when things were going well, like a really good surgical outcome or something, just take a moment here. And then through that repetition, it became more powerful for when things were different. So that's the idea of just offering some simple, supportive touch to yourself. What I'm going to do next, and again, I can offer you handouts and get that to April, or however we want to think about doing that. The self-compassion break is actually something that can be done in about 30 seconds. I'll do it as a bit longer of a practice so you can get a taste of it. And it basically invokes the three ways we invite self-compassion in. One is just this idea of being mindful. We often know when we're miserable, right? But we tend to do things that keep us from really facing into that, distracting ourselves, or we're so busy we don't even have time to attend to ourselves. So the mindfulness piece is just validating and acknowledging that whatever we're experiencing is difficult. And there's something we call common humanity, this idea that when we start to feel bad, we start to feel isolated. And that just makes us feel bad about feeling bad. So it's a reminder that whatever we're going through, others have experienced this, and that we're not alone, and we're certainly not broken for feeling the way we feel. And then the third aspect is just being kind to ourselves. So same thing. This will do this as kind of like a guided meditation. But in order to explore self-compassion, we have to bring up a little bit of suffering. So maybe just settling into the chair, taking a deep breath to reset yourself, and taking a quick scan through the body. Just softening and easing, looking for any tension that doesn't need to be there, and releasing that. And I'm going to ask you to bring up a difficult situation, but please make it a mild one. Okay, if we go straight to the most difficult things, we can be overwhelmed and you can't learn. So something mild to moderate, maybe a frustrating interaction with a coworker or student, or a troubling email, or an offhand comment that a family member made that's really bugging you, or something irritating with tech support. So bring in something that's maybe a 2 to 3 on a scale of 10, and really make that experience come alive in your mind. Okay, the people that were there, what was said, circumstances, and notice that as you do this, you start to feel it in your body. We're really looking for that sense that you're triggered here, maybe some heat, some tension. Allow yourself to feel that. And as you feel that, I'd like you to repeat after me, suffering is part of life. Okay, just gently and softly, suffering is part of life. And let the words soak into you. This is the mindfulness piece. This is you validating yourself. Yeah, this is hard. And other words might work for you, just like that. Yeah, this is really hard. I'm struggling here. Or, other people would feel this way. Or, this is not right. I don't like this. Just again, just taking a moment to recognize the struggle that's here and to validate it for yourself. Then repeat after me, struggle, suffering is part of life. This kind of struggle, this suffering is part of life. And again, let those words kind of soak into you, like your favorite tea in hot water, just spreading into you, saying them gently. This is the common humanity piece. Just reminding ourselves that we're not alone here. And we're certainly, like I said, not broken for having these feelings. And other words may apply, like, yeah, I am not alone. Or others would feel this way. Or this is what it feels like when this happens to human beings. Just knowing that you're not alone with this. Then finally, the kindness piece. As you relive this situation in your mind, I'd invite you to try any of those hand gestures that might have worked. Maybe just simply putting a hand over your heart, just taking a breath and just feeling yourself offering support for yourself in this difficult situation. Like I said, maybe feel the caring soaking into your body from your hand. And then finding words that you need to hear right now in this situation. Maybe something like, may I be kind to myself? Or, hey, I'm here with you. I will always be with you. Or maybe something like, hey, we've got this. We've been through this. We know what to do here. Again, just words that you need to hear so you feel supported. And sometimes that's hard to do. Again, we're trained not to care for ourselves, it seems. So if you're having trouble finding words, imagine a dear friend had the exact same situation, whatever this situation is, and they're struggling with this. What words would you say to them? What would you want them to remember in their hearts to show them that you cared? And then those words you offer them, can you offer them to yourself? Again, in a gentle voice. This is so important to attend to the body, see how the body's responding, breathing. And just this pattern of recognizing what's here, acknowledging the struggle, allowing yourself to remember that others have experienced this, and then words of support. So I'll just end that practice. So that's, like I said, what we call a self-compassion break. And it is something, the whole process can be done, again, very briefly, just recognizing that something's going wrong, and then maybe a hand over a heart, and then, yeah, this is hard, and acknowledging that others experience this, and offering yourself those words of support. So that's just one example of self-compassion. There's other practices to deal with specific things. For instance, that inner critic, okay, or difficult emotions, or assessing core values, or caregiver fatigue, and we can do that kind of stuff going forward. Or I can be more mindfulness oriented. We can look for, practices that can bring mindfulness into the moment, the resourcing moves that, mental health professionals use, and other kind of cool things to try. But that's it. I mean, does anybody have any comments or observations? Did anybody find that challenging or useful? And again, don't feel like you have to speak. It's a crazy day, I'm sure, and you got millions of things to do, and you probably already have the stress building up. So don't feel like you need to speak. But yeah, it looks like it's 12:29. So, if you do have questions or anything, you can get my contact info from April. And April, I can send you handouts and stuff. Yeah, thank you, Abby. I'm glad. Yeah, I'm happy you found it useful. So we can do lots more down the road if you guys wish. As a matter of fact, I was telling April, I think, self-compassion is so foundational. Subsequent meetings, we can just kind of check in with folks, and if there's something you're drawn to or interested in, we can focus on that. So, all right, well, I'm going to hand it over to April and let her take over.
That's great. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. And yeah, if anybody has anything specific that you would like for John to bring the next time, please let me know. But I think we're open to whatever you have to share with us.
Yeah, thank you, Doug Lee. Thank you. Yeah, well, I'm thinking maybe the inner critic, unless no one has problems with the inner critic. I mean, if you don't, forget it. We can talk about something else. But we can.
I don't think anybody has any inner critic. No, that doesn't exist.
All right.
All right. Yeah, that would be great. I think that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah,
Do you
so
want to hang around? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that we'll be back in 2 weeks,
sure.
which is October 6th, will be our next opportunity to gather.
Okay. Can we just hang around a little bit afterwards, April, so I
Yeah.
can figure out, okay, what,
That sounds great.
yeah.
All right.
'Cause I
Thank
was-
you all so
oh, bye.
much.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer, being here, and Lachelle, everybody.